everyone, today I thought that I would film my labour/birth story because so many of you guys have been asking for it on Instagram, and also I just wanted to film it so that Elsie could look back on it when she's a bit older and see how my whole birth went. It took an unexpected turn. It was nothing like the birth that I had planned or my birth preferences, but that's okay. Yeah, I just thought today that I would share how it all went, my whole labour story. So I have to go back a bit because in order to understand my actual birth, you need to understand the bit before. I had a pretty normal pregnancy. The whole of my pregnancy was pretty standard, normal. Sometimes I would have slightly high blood pressure, but nothing that they were worried about. Then on Wednesday the 28th, I was 40 weeks and 5 days. So I was already overdue and I went for my 40-week appointment. Now, all of my midwife appointments had been knocked back slightly because I went on holiday at one point. So yeah, it was my 40-week appointment, but I was 40 weeks and 5 days. At that appointment, they did all the routine checks. They checked my wee and they checked my blood pressure whilst they did this. And my blood pressure was abnormally high. And I had protein in my wee, which I hadn't had before. So she was like, look, I'm gonna have to send you to the maternity day assessment unit and they need to decide what's gonna happen. She said to me, like, you might be induced today or they might send you back home. They just basically need to do some extra checks and you need to speak to a doctor. That was about 11:50. I had the appointment in the morning and she told me to go get lunch because she was like, if not, you're not gonna eat. So I went back home. At this point I was on my own because my boyfriend was still at work and I told him not to come with me to the appointment because I obviously didn't think anything was gonna happen. I went back to my mum's house and I said to her, look, my blood pressure's really high. I've got protein in my urine and they've said that I need to go get checked at the hospital. And she was like, let me cancel all of my work meetings and come with you. At that point I could tell that she was more concerned than me. I was literally there like, oh, I just need to go get checked, like I've been there a couple of times, it's fine. Yeah, she was a bit more concerned, but we did go and get lunch first at a cafe because obviously eating was a priority. We got to the maternity day assessment unit and they did all of their checks. My blood pressure was still high, there was still protein in my urine, and they put me on the monitors as well. Baby was all healthy, but obviously my blood pressure was a bit high. So they said to me, look, we're gonna give you a sweep. Well, they asked me if I wanted a sweep and I said okay, but they pretty much said, look, let's give you a sweep and a stretch and sweep and we'll see how you get along. You might go into natural labour because you are overdue. So I said fine, I'll get the stretch and sweep. The stretch and sweep was probably one of the things I was most scared about. Not gonna lie, I was absolutely crapping myself because I've had nobody go down there before, and also just the thought of it just made me feel a bit uncomfortable and I was like, ooh. Luckily my mum was there because I squeezed her hand so tightly it was painful. Like, I am not getting a stretch and sweep again because it was painful. I had a doctor do it. I don't know if that makes a difference, but she was definitely making sure that everything was stretched and I don't know. Anyway, after that the doctor came back in and she was like, it's really good news because you're already 2 centimeters dilated and your cervix, I think they described it as soft or effaced, but I can't exactly remember. I don't really remember the technical terms that they used because, I mean, why would I? So basically it was really favourable for them to be able to induce me. They said that I could go back home as long as I came back the next morning to have my blood pressure checked and all of that. And at this point they also planned for me to be induced on Friday the 30th at 3 PM. I didn't end up being induced then, so that's not too relevant, but they were planning for me to be induced on the Friday. So I said, okay, I'll come back in tomorrow and I'll just get my bloods checked, etc. They said, make sure you bring your bags with you though. So at that point I was thinking, oh, am I just gonna have a baby on Thursday then? Go back home and I tell my boyfriend everything that's happened. He's like, okay, I'll come with you to the appointment tomorrow and we'll make sure that we've got all of our hospital bags packed. We went in at 10 AM for the appointment. They checked my blood pressure. They did a few more checks, checked my urine. My blood pressure was not going down at all. It was pretty high. And they said, look, we think you have mild preeclampsia. We're not sending you home. You're going to go up to the induction ward. At this point I was like, wow, okay. I was like, am I going to have a baby today then? Am I going to be induced today? Because they said to me, because I was 2 centimetres dilated, I would only need my waters breaking, and I didn't really need like the pessary or the gels or any of the other induction methods. I literally just needed my waters to be broken and put on the drip. I was like, oh, I might have a baby today on Thursday. And then the doctor came to me, she was like, look, I'm not going to lie to you. We are understaffed and there are a lot of people having babies because September is obviously a very busy time to have babies. So she said, it's unlikely you're going to be induced today. You're probably going to be induced on Friday or Saturday. So I was like, okay, fair enough. We went up to the induction ward, and I mean, it's as you'd expect, just an open ward. I think there were 5 different bays which all had women in it. So we were put into one and basically just told to wait there until a delivery suite became available. Whilst I was there, I had blood pressure medication, I had my blood pressure checked quite a lot, and then I just had like general checkups, but it was very boring. The induction ward was my least favourite place because nothing was going on. All of these other women in the bays, they were getting pessaries, gels, all of that stuff done, but we didn't really need any of that. We just needed to wait for a delivery suite to become available and a midwife. Also, somebody in the bay next to us, and she was also waiting for a delivery suite, and I was so aware that she arrived there before us, so unless I went into natural labour, she was going to be the first one to go and have a baby, and then it was going to be us. That Thursday night, Thursday 29th, I literally had about 3 hours sleep, and it was all broken up because they come and like check your blood pressure at like 2 in the morning, then they want to give you medication at 3 AM, then they want to do something at 4 AM. So I was just getting woken up like every other hour. My boyfriend was sleeping on the chair next to me in an upright position, which, I mean, he ended up sleeping on that chair for 3 days, and I don't even know how he did it, but obviously he didn't complain because I was the one going through all of the whole labour process. So yeah, didn't really get much sleep, and then at 6:30 AM on the Saturday, I was already awake when she came in. She was like, oh, hi Maisie, can you get your bags ready? In 15 minutes we're going to take you to the delivery suite. And I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have a baby. I woke up Charlie, I was like, look babe, we've got to get our stuff ready because we're going to the delivery suite. I was so excited. So now we're on to Friday the 30th. We get to the delivery suite and it all hits. I'm like, I'm gonna have a baby in this room. What the hell? And they're like, okay Maisie, just relax for a bit and then we're gonna break your waters. So the midwife comes in that's going to break my waters. She was really nice, and she described the whole process of breaking the waters to me. I looked at the needle things that she was sticking in to break the waters, and I was like, that looks painful. They literally looked like long white knitting needles, and I was like, they're going to put that in me. Anyway, turns out it didn't hurt at all, so that was absolutely fine. My waters broke, and Elsie had done a poo in me, so it was like light meconium, I think they called it. So she'd done a poo in me, which I think used to be a concern in births, but they actually didn't really seem too concerned. Me and Charlie were there like, oh shit, this is bad, like she's done a poo in me, because I'd heard all of these stories, but all of the midwives seemed pretty calm about it, so I was like, okay, must be fine. That was about 7 AM they broke my waters, and then they said that we were allowed to go on a walk, and we went to go and get a few more of us bits out of the car because I hadn't actually got the baby bag out of the car to go to the induction ward. So we decided to go on a walk to the car and go to Costa, which was in the hospital. And the funniest thing happened when we went on this walk. So the labour ward's on the 1st floor, and we had to get a lift obviously to get down. Me and Charlie got stuck in the lift. I'm not even joking when I say my heart skipped a beat. I was like, I am not having a baby in a lift with him. Like, he doesn't know how to deliver babies. This is terrifying. Luckily we ended up just going back up to the top, opening it and walking down the stairs, and I'm scared of lifts anyway, but I was not wanting to go in a lift after that. We go on the walk, we come back, it's about 10 AM at this point, and they're describing what's going to happen to me next. They say, we're going to put you on a drip, which is going to speed up the process of labour. It's going to put like extra hormones into your body. I think it's like oxytocin and stuff. Again, I don't really know all of the technical terms, but I had the drip. Prostatin? No, I don't know, you guys will know what I mean by having the drip, hopefully. So they were like, we're gonna put it in, it's up to you, do you want to have the epidural now, or do you want to have like nothing now, do you want to have gas and air, etc. At this point I did have like mild backache. I say mild, it was hurting me. I was like, Charlie, this actually really hurts. And when I was walking I was like, oh, you know when you can really feel it. So took about 20 minutes for me to decide, because originally I said that I didn't want the epidural, that it would be the last resort, but at this point I wasn't getting the birth that I wanted. So I really wanted a water birth, and they said, look, you can't have that, basically. So I thought, I'm not getting the birth that I want, I'm gonna go on this drip. I can't really walk around too much with this drip in my hand. Should I just have the epidural? I looked at Charlie, he was like, it's your decision, but you already seem in pain. I was also really tired because obviously I hadn't had much sleep the night before. So I decided that I was going to get the epidural, especially as I'd heard that the drip can make your contractions worse. Looking back, I'm so glad that I made the decision to get the epidural because of how the rest of my labour went, but you'll find out all about that. So I said, yeah, I'm gonna get the epidural. They said, okay, we need to get the anaesthetist and everyone to come in that does the epidural. So I was like, fine. They get around to putting the epidural in. The anaesthetist comes in, they tell me all of like the risks and everything to putting the epidural in. I say, yeah, that's fine. And he put the thing in my back. That didn't really hurt, to be honest. And they also put the cannula in so that I could have the drip and any other medication that I need in the cannula. The cannula did hurt a little bit to put in, but it wasn't too bad. They also ended up putting a catheter in, which again wasn't bad, but I think I'd have the epidural by the time the catheter went in, so yeah, that didn't hurt. When the epidural went in, something happened that they didn't the next part of my birth story is probably the worst part, because something went wrong, which I'm going to explain. But it was it definitely was the worst part actually of my whole birth experience. I'm gonna try not to cry. I'm not scared of needles or anything like that. So he put the epidural in my back, but they forgot to put the fluids up at the same time. I think the anaesthetist was meant to tell them, and then they were meant to put the fluids up, and they basically didn't. So they administered the first bit of the epidural. I'm not exactly too sure how it all works. And because these fluids weren't up, my blood pressure dropped dramatically, and then the baby's blood pressure dropped, and then they couldn't find the heartbeat of the baby. Now, her heart didn't stop or anything, but in that moment you're like terrified. Like they called the, oh my goodness, they called the emergency buzzer, and all of these doctors and all of these midwives were in the room. I would say there was at least like 8 people, and I was lying on the bed and I could hear like them all discussing what to do. But obviously like I did feel fine, even though my blood pressure dropped. I felt fine, and I burst into tears. Like I just did my makeup. Yeah, I burst into tears. I was uncontrollably crying, my whole body was shaking. And I remember this like top midwife was like leaning over me. She was like, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. But they were like trying to get the monitor on the baby's heartbeat, they couldn't find it. Obviously I've got all of these doctors around me, and I'm like looking for Charlie around the room because he's been pushed to the edge, because he's obviously not important and can't really help me. And I looked over at him and he was just like white, like pure white, and I was like, oh my goodness, he looks so scared. And I was, bearing in mind I was terrified, I was like, it's gonna be okay from the bed, because I just felt so bad for him. And then I was speaking to the doctor, and the next thing I heard was Charlie gagging in the toilet, because where he was so anxious, he felt so sick, because obviously, well, like he said I was about to say it and then I was like, I sound a bit big-headed, but he said like Elsie and me as like his whole life, and at that point it seemed so scary because we didn't know what was going on and we didn't know if we were both going to be okay. And I think it's so weird because obviously they're trying to just get you back up to the normal level. They're not like explaining what's going on in that moment. So I think that was what was so scary. So I heard him gagging and I was like, oh my goodness, like I just felt so bad for him. And bad for myself, obviously. I managed to administer these fluids, like they rushed through a bag or something. They had to like run out of the room, go and get these fluids, and then like put them in the cannula really fast. And yeah, it was just all a bit dramatic, and it shouldn't have really happened because the fluids should have been in the first place, and then it wouldn't have happened. So that, I'm not gonna lie, was really, really scary, as you can tell. After the epidural was in, they checked how dilated I was again, and I was 3 centimeters dilated. So I was like, oh, this is good. This was at about midday, I would say, maybe a bit after that. They checked me and I was that. So I was like, right, that's good. They obviously kept on upping the drip, and then my epidural was like kicking in now. I had it on the highest level, so I had like the one that you could like keep on topping up. They said to me, look Maisie, just top it up to the highest level because you might as well try and get some rest, try and get some sleep, and like feel okay. Like you might as well use the epidural to its best advantage, if that makes sense. So I couldn't really feel anything at this point, and the epidural had all kicked in. I was 3 centimeters. I thought that's good. On the monitor I could see the contractions starting from the drip, and I eventually got up to having 3 contractions every 10 minutes, and that consistently stayed the same. They checked me again a bit later on. I think it was around 2, maybe 3, and I was 4 centimeters dilated. So they were like, okay, it's progressing. I knew it wasn't progressing as fast as they wanted because I'd asked loads of questions, and I was like, oh, how fast ideally would you like us to progress? And I knew it wasn't progressing that fast. After that, every time I was having a contraction, the baby's heart rate was dipping, and she was basically getting really stressed in there. Apparently it can be a side effect of having the drip, like it can make babies really distressed and everything like that. So I think it was about 6 o'clock they decided to turn it off, and they were like, look, we'll see if you continue to have contractions. We're not going to test to see how dilated you are yet. We're going to give it a bit more of a chance. And they basically turned the drip off because she was getting too stressed. After that I continued having contractions, 3 every 10 minutes, even though the drip wasn't on. Obviously the hormones were still in my body and everything, and her heart rate was still dropping. They were moving me into different positions to see if that would work, because they were like, sometimes if you squish the umbilical cord that can make them distressed. But every different position they were moving me into wasn't making her any less stressed, if that makes sense. About 8 o'clock they checked me again, and I was still only 4 centimeters. So I'd pretty much had 5-6 hours of labor, 5-6 hours of her getting distressed and everything like that, and I was the same amount of dilation, so nothing was working essentially. At this point my midwife's changed again, and I had the midwife that I had in the morning. So in the morning, the midwife that broke my waters was on the end of her night shift. She came back on for her night shift at 8 o'clock, and she was my midwife, and I was like, well, she's like, I thought you would have had your baby at this point. I was like, yeah, I thought so too, but clearly not. So she was the midwife that I had, and she said there are 2 options. You can continue, we can put the drip back on and see if you dilate further, but it's really unlikely because of how the previous hours had gone, or you're gonna have a C-section. And I said, I'm having a C-section, aren't I? Like, there's no way you guys are all going to agree to put her in more distress when it's obviously not working. My body's obviously rejecting it. I just want to take a minute to say, every single midwife we had, because we had 3 different midwives during the whole of my birth, were amazing. Like, they were absolutely phenomenal. We loved them all. We would chat to them all like they were our friends. Obviously where I had the preeclampsia and I was a bit more high risk, they had to stay in the room at all times. So me and Charlie were like, right, well, if we're gonna have a discussion, we might as well include everyone else in the room. I had the discussion with the midwives about what they thought was best, and eventually they agreed that an emergency C-section would be the way. Now, they explained to me there are different categories of emergency C-sections. So there's like emergency, and then there's like emergency. if that even makes sense. Like, there's emergency where they have to like put you down. It's like everyone's in distress, baby's in distress. If they don't get them out, it's gonna be dangerous. And then there's like emergency, like we need to get them out within the next hour, and ours was the emergency, if that makes sense. If you can hear Elsie, she's in the background by the way, but she's asleep. I said, okay, I'll have the C-section. At this point, Charlie's looking at me like, why aren't you terrified? But I think I just take everything in my stride, especially when things scare me. I'm just like quite relaxed about it. It's almost like I go into default mode that I'm overly relaxed. So the midwife said to me, look, doctors are going to come in and they might say to you that you're really young and that they'd rather not give you the C-section because they don't want to damage your womb and everything. And I was like, my baby's in distress, like she needs to come out and I need to do what's best for her. Like at this point I wasn't really caring too much about me. I just wanted her here because 6 AM till 8 PM is a long stretch of time to be worried about your baby. She was like, if you are 100% set on the C-section with all the risks we've agreed, I will go out and speak to the doctor before they come in, because I was really worried as a 20-year-old that they were going to come in and almost be quite patronising, and I would feel like I couldn't stand up for myself and speak about what I actually wanted. And she was like, I explained this to her, I was like, I'm worried that's going to happen, and she said, this is why we're here to support you and explain what you want. And the doctor came in, and to be honest, he didn't even question the decision. He actually agreed that the C-section was the best avenue to go down. He explained all the risks. When they explained all the risks to me, I was like, okay, this sounds quite bad, doesn't it? Like, they were like, 1 in blah 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 will pop your bladder, 1 in blah 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 you'll be paralysed. And then he said something like 1 in 1,000 this will happen. And then I looked really concerned and he was like, it's quite rare though. I was like, 1 in 1,000 isn't that rare, is it? Before we knew it, Charlie was in his scrubs or whatever you call it, and I was being wheeled down to the theatre. And at that point I think I thought, oh my goodness, what is this going to be like? So obviously you guys know that I had the epidural, but they wanted to give me a spinal block instead, so I had the epidural removed and then they put the spinal block in, and I had the nicest anaesthetist at this point doing like all of this stuff. So the spinal block went in. Oh, my alarm. The spinal block went in and it's so weird. You like get this tingling feeling, and then they were like, just make sure you lie down as soon as we tell you to because you'll lose all feeling. Spinal block was in, I was laying down, and they go along with this spray to check that you are numb all over. And it's really weird because you can feel the pressure of them touching you, but you can't feel any pain. And when they told that to me, I was like, but how, like, how does that work? Like, I didn't understand how it worked, and I was like, am I going to be able to feel them cutting me and like pulling her out? I couldn't. I could feel pressure, but I really couldn't feel too much. They start the surgery. Charlie's next to me. I've got the anaesthetist like behind my head, and she was just trying to relax me. She was doing the most, and I absolutely love her for it. So she was talking to me about Jack Whitehall actually, and like some program to watch. I don't know, but it was keeping me distracted from what was going on, because obviously you can hear quite a lot as well. And then I also had Adele playing in the background because they were like, have you got a playlist ready? I was like, didn't actually plan to have an emergency C-section, so I haven't got a playlist ready. And Charlie was like, oh, it's gonna be Adele, isn't it? Because they were like, oh, what's your favourite artist? Charlie was like, it's gotta be Adele, hasn't it? So Elsie was actually born to Adele. She was born to Make You Feel My Love, which, I mean, is everything to me because I love that song. I played it throughout my whole pregnancy. It could have been any Adele song, to be fair. I would have loved any Adele song, but that one is just so special to me. Anyway, I'm lying there. The anaesthetist is like trying to keep me distracted. Everything's good. Within 15 minutes of them starting the surgery, she was held up above the like curtain, and I just burst into tears. It is the most incredible, I can't even explain like the feeling you get. Like, it's just like an overwhelming love for this like tiny human. Do you know what I mean? And so and they held her up above the thing, and then she started screaming, and I was like in even more tears because obviously all you want is a baby to scream. And she was taken over to the paediatrician to get checked and everything. It felt like she was over there for quite a long time, but she probably wasn't. Charlie left my side to go and cut the cord, and I remember when he left my side I was like almost lying there and I was like, oh, like they're both not here. Before I knew it they were back over with me, and it was time to meet her for the first time, which was so incredible. They brought her all over wrapped to me and I held her for like 15 minutes whilst I was getting sewn back up. After about 15 minutes I did start to feel really sick. I kept on like swallowing a lot of saliva and I don't know, I felt like I was going to throw up. So I said to the anaesthetist, I feel like I'm going to throw up, and she pumped loads of stuff into my cannula, like anti-sickness stuff. I have no idea what it was, but it worked. Elsie went over to Charlie because I felt sick and I was like, I can't really hold her whilst I feel this sick. I kind of need a bowl in case I am. Turns out I wasn't sick because the anti-sickness worked, but Charlie ended up holding her, and it was just so lovely to see them together as well, because obviously it's an emotional moment for all of us. It took about 45 minutes from when I had her at 9:41, by the way, I forgot to say. I had her at 9:41 and she weighed £7.14 and she was completely healthy, which was so amazing. So from when she was born at 9:41, it took them about 45 minutes for me to get all stitched and sewn back up. I could definitely feel the pressure of them pushing like on the top half of my stomach when I was having the thing sewn up, if that makes sense. You can hear her in the background. She likes making little noises in her sleep. Anyway, I could feel all of that stuff, but before I knew it, it was over and done with and I had a baby and she was healthy and safe. I remember the paediatrician came over to me and was like, you have the healthiest baby, like she's absolutely fine. And I also forgot to mention that when she came out of me, her cord was wrapped around her a lot. I think it was wrapped around her neck. So they said that even if I was having like a natural labour, it's unlikely, well, it could have been quite bad as well, because obviously the cord was wrapped around her neck, which is never good. Yeah, I was then put onto the bed and we were taken to the recovery room where I had my toast, my jam, and I breastfed her for the first time, and Charlie changed her nappy for the first time and got her changed, and then it was time to go over to the other ward, which is like the post I don't know what it's called like the postpartum ward, the ward where you go after you've had the baby. And that was pretty much my whole labour and birth story. I'm going to finish it there, otherwise I'll end up talking about all the days after that were so amazing. I just want to say the midwives at Hinchinbrook Hospital in Huntingdon were absolutely phenomenal. I had 3 different midwives throughout my whole labour. We had Lindsay, Charlie and Sammy, and I cannot thank them enough. They put me at such ease and made me feel so looked after, which is exactly what I needed. And then we had so many midwives after my birth that were so amazing as well, but I can't name them all because I had that many. I just wanted to say a little thank you to them. I know they'll never see this, but I know they know that I'm so grateful, because I was like, thank you so much. I'm like that anyway, but I was overly like that. But that was my whole labour and birth story. Let me know if you want a video on my C-section recovery or anything else, to be honest. And I do hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. If you are going to have a C-section anytime soon, I would say it is actually really relaxing, and I would definitely opt for a C-section next time, especially with how my birth and labour has gone already. I would just opt for one because my body just didn't want to give birth, did it? If you have got a C-section booked, good luck, it'll be fine. And yeah, anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling and I will see you all soon. Bye.